So we started off 6 months ago when the AI Opportunities Action Plan came out, and we said, well, how does this help us as businesses to grow and to make the UK a successful AI market? So I wonder whether I could get you both to just comment whilst I grapple with this microphone. Introduce yourself first of all, and then tell us a little bit about what you think are the main priorities for UK businesses at the moment when it comes to AI.
Should I start? Okay, I have the mic. Thank you very much for having me. For all of you that haven't met me before, I'm Zoe. I'm one of the investors at Dawn Capital. We're a London-based venture capital fund investing at the Series A and Series B early growth stage. We've been around for 17 years now and have been investing in businesses that sell to other businesses, like Mimecast, that some of you might have been familiar with, iZettle, the little card readers, and more recently supporters of Quantexa, Data IQ, and some other slightly late stage companies that you may have heard of. Now, personally, I used to be a software developer myself before pivoting into an investment world. So I spent a lot of time also building the builder community, which helps encourage entrepreneurship and encouraging people to take up careers in technology. With that in mind, to answer your question, Tim, on what do we think businesses should do and could do better, I think encouraging more of that grassroots adoption and almost opening the floodgates a little bit to let people experiment is something that we've seen have encouraged, say, legal tech adoption, for example. The associates are the first ones to start using and becoming power users. In medical fields, doctors, some of the doctors have ChatGPT on their phones and trying to figure out how that can be used and leveraged. And now scribing has become much more widely adopted through this kind of grassroots push. And so that's something we believe could help encourage the adoption.
Great, thank you. And Husayn, from your perspective, or I'll let you introduce yourself as well in a minute, but you've seen some really fast growth businesses, and a lot of them in the AI space. So from your perspective, what do you think are the real barriers that you're still seeing to adoption of AI technology, and what are the ways to overcome them?
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Tim. It's really, really good to be here. My office is upstairs, so it was as convenient as it gets. So my name is Husayn. I'm the founder and CEO at Quench. We are essentially a cursor for your software tools. So we help every employee search across all their tools, be it Notion, Confluence, Dropbox, and beyond, within seconds. And then we run AI assistants to help automate things that usually slow you down. Prior to that, my last company was an AI company called Onfido, the identity verification sort of tool. As far as your question on barriers, there is parts of what the promise is of AI and what it sort of delivers, and there's a big gap. And the barrier is an expectation one of what can be done and what it isn't actually delivering. There's this main issue around the big tech giants are talking about how advanced some of their tooling is, and now essentially, whether it's next month or 6 months or 12 months, the whole workforce is going to be 100% automated. We've been hearing that for every quarter, right, for 2 years. And it just isn't likely to happen, and it doesn't happen on the ground. The main issue there is that, especially those who are building foundation models, if any of them talk a little bit less about how advanced and amazing their technology is, their share price will go down. So there's this hype cycle is self-reinforcing and pushing hard. Our focus is mid-market, so we're 50 to 500 employees. We have one that is sort of Fortune 250, but I would say adoption is still very, very basic across the majority of enterprises. There's a lot more talk than actual use of AI. Where there is good use of AI tends to be in their existing tools, and their existing tools are now leveraging AI to a greater extent. So a big barrier is a misunderstanding and a hype, and essentially the gap to reality. The second is, like as Zoe was saying, is like this is a bit different to traditional software, and it doesn't seem to be as successful when it's sort of top down. It tends to be much better when it's bottom up. And where it is perhaps seen as a bit more as a resource, the way one would look at hiring employees, as opposed to a software where you want to procure software. Software, you tend to buy it, you tend to install it, you might update it automatically every year, and it does a specific task and it's good to go. Whereas AI, and especially agentic AI, it should be thought of as more of a resource, and one that you get and then you train, and crucially, you monitor and you improve and you develop a lot more like you would consider a human resource. So the training parts and the outlook on it is also like a key part of it. And the final thing I would say around, often the goal seems to be, how can we use AI in our company? Which I think is just like a very, very wrong way of thinking about it. The goal should be, our company's core competence is this, or our value proposition is this, or we're good at this. How can we use AI? In fact, how can we use the least amount of AI to improve on our goals and our outcomes, or whatever that may be? And it goes back to the old saying around, find a real problem you want to solve and see how you can solve it. Now we're lucky that AI is very likely to be able to play a role, but doesn't necessarily have to.
Fantastic, thank you. Some excellent points there. Thinking about adoption, we often think about the consumer adoption, getting the consumers to use the products and the services. Zoe, I want to build on something you were saying before about getting the employees, getting our teams to actually adopt it as well. And I know you've been quite involved with the builder communities, you said, and the hackathons. Can you maybe sort of explain a bit about how that is a way of being able to get teams on board to understand the potential of AI, and how maybe you've been using that with leadership teams as well?
Great. I'm sure everybody can relate that when you think about everything that's going on in your life, you wish there's this one bit that could be automated, or like that part that could be done better. And you know it's not going to take you that long in order to come up with a better way. It could be as simple as creating an email template that is like a snippet that you could start copying and pasting. But you don't have the time to do it, and you don't think about doing it, or there's just like a tiny little thing that you don't know the answer to, and that becomes the blocker of you automating it. I definitely have a ton of those that I need to do. And in fact, I'm gonna go to a mini hack night tonight to try and figure one out. And I found having a time box and an environment where everybody is trying to solve that problem, that tiny little problem for themselves, is a really useful way of encouraging taking that last mile. And to what you were saying before, Husayn, kind of AI is great, but everybody has a bit of a different need, and in order to get the most out of it, you need that last mile customization to what you're trying to do. So kind of to your point of consumer adoption, of grassroots adoption, what we've seen have worked in companies is when they have these internal hackathons, or like an internal hack night for their employees, and they bring in vendors that they might want to explore, and that could be kind of an accelerated program to think about deployment of email automation or like sales automation, and pull someone up as a great example, so that we all had the same problem of blank stage, staring at a blank stage, don't know what to do. But if you have a template, you can make modifications. That makes it much easier. So kind of just creating those precious moments where everybody is trying to solve something, and providing the tools and guidance and the right talent in the same place to try and solve it, is something that we've seen worked quite well.
Brilliant, thank you. Husayn, we've had conversations, I know you've spoken to MPs and government as well. They often talk about wanting to replicate the way the businesses work. I'm conscious that there's a lot of people here who are products or come from a product management background. They understand how Agile works. They understand the software development process. All of that makes sense to us within this room. Government talks that language, like we were hearing before, in terms of there's pilots, the grow, the scale, the scan, pilots, grow. They want to be able to replicate that. What do you think are the reasons why government isn't able to move as quickly, as successfully, as agile as businesses when they're trying to bring in massive game-changing technologies like AI?
When any large institution, especially one where the costs of something going wrong is amplified, and it doesn't get much more amplified in the government. So bad use case of AI will be headline news across the board. It's very reasonable and understandable why they have to take things at a slower pace and run with things that are a bit more proven. And that's why it is a good approach, like the sandbox approach, which is increasingly being adopted. Like we saw this in fintech about a decade ago, where technology and finance, i.e. fintech, was relatively new. There were early front runners that were a bit more enthusiastic and sometimes just completely inappropriate, like the way Wonga treated some of his consumers. And that led to the financial regulator. They shut them down, rightfully, but then instead of shutting down all innovation, they just regulated it more effectively to say we want consumers to be able to benefit from new innovations while ensuring that they're protected. So the beauty with a sandbox approach is often it's more of a learning exercise, so that it gives a chance for procurement and those who are operating at different government levels, different departments, to have exposure and access to the latest approaches and the latest technologies on how things can be done. And then as they're learning and as sort of they're sharing notes, whenever the time comes to take a step forward, hopefully they're going to be leveraging the most advanced or latest technologies they're able to doing it. So they are more risk averse and move slowly, but understandably so, and I don't think that's ever going to change. The best way to address that is typically sandbox, so that they learn from each other, and the right regulation in place, just to ensure, in my mind, good regulation doesn't actually stop adoption, it will accelerate it, just the way smart regulation in the UK helped us become the fintech capital of the world in many ways.
So it's interesting to draw the analogy then with fintech. So what would you say are the things that we as the AI industry should be doing to help the government to deliver that same sort of growth that fintech saw?
I suspect there is a learning gap and a knowledge gap and an experience gap, just generally between industry and industries that are a little bit more traditional, or governments that doesn't have the necessity to innovate as much. So events and all of the work that UKAI, I know the showcases that you do, and that I think is a key and central part of it. But the second part is whether it's the investment community or journalists or others, to talk about use cases and make them real. When fintech, there came a point where fintech, there was, like AI at the outset, the first couple of years, there was a little bit of nervousness around it, especially with the bad payday lender news. But the moments that sort of switched was where people started to say, oh wow, Revolut or TransferWise helps me save so much. We're so quick to open a bank account. It's got these so many material benefits to your average user when people started to think of fintech in a much more positive light. So the moments that you get access to healthcare and you're able to get more face time in terms of care, or a faster, sort of a shorter waiting time, or at the moment where you hear that someone you care about is now learning and getting special attention because AI is helping their teacher give them personalized learning, whatever these stories and these use cases are shared more widely, I think is a moment where more and more, not just regulators, but procurement and government officials and beyond will see that this is actually, if done appropriately, can have massive positive advantage and benefit.
Yeah, thank you. I want to change the direction a bit and talk about talent. And Zoe, you work with some incredible companies, and you work with some incredible companies. Part of what you're doing is scanning the horizon all the time to try and find talent and the companies who have hired that talent. So what do you think we are missing at the moment in terms of, in the UK, getting access to the right talent? What concerns do you have about that, and what do you think the government should be doing more of?
So I would say I'm slightly biased here as someone who is on a skilled worker visa for the past 5 years. If I think about reflecting on my own journey at university, when I was studying here in the UK, and when I was entering the workforce, and when I was thinking about other career opportunities, I do think there's a lot of highly skilled talent that will wake up and think about, will I get visa sponsorship from this company that I think is interesting? And when I was moving companies, I had a 1 month delay in the approval process, where every day I woke up and thought, damn it, I'm gonna get deported from this country. But so I think that's like one side in terms of if we think about how to attract talent that's not just homegrown in the UK, but educated in the UK and wants to be staying in the UK, kind of having that level of support. And I think the Global Talent Visa is an excellent program that I've seen many people have pursued. It's a great path and it's great support. And on the other side, kind of as we are looking at our own companies and as we're looking into companies that are making strides in the global stage, we actually believe the UK and broader Europe is a very strategic hub because there's fewer distractions. I think companies that are building up their product and tech team here in the UK and here in Europe, like the general retention rate of the employees are higher. People are more focused in solving the problems at hand. So we definitely see huge encouragement of retaining talent here.
When I've spoken to some founders, they've said they struggle to get talent in. They're trying to recruit people, and they want it to be easier sometimes. Is that a challenge that you find with some of your companies? And do you think we need to look at making it simpler? The government in the action plan has talked about the growth, the talent growth strategy, and being able to make that whole process easier.
So I think one side of it is what governments can do, and the other side is almost like what the startups can do themselves. I'm taking a page out of the corporate playbook when it comes to recruitment. And this is something with the hackathons and the builder events, we have a broader talent strategy as well. So you don't know what you don't know is the way I've put it. As someone who is studying a STEM degree, I remember walking down the road and it's hedge funds and banks and occasionally a law firm putting up smoothie stands, and they give automatic umbrellas, which is like a huge hit for students that's looking to explore what the world looks like. And I think startups generally don't have the human resources or the awareness to be doing that. Obviously, every CS student today knows about OpenAI and Anthropic, but they may not have heard of a Series B, Series C, maybe sometimes even unicorns here in the UK because it's just not there and it's not visible. And so with the events that we're hosting as well as the platform that we're building, we're almost creating a service as a platform for companies in our own portfolios as well as companies that we're engaging, putting them up on stage, recruiting or kind of attracting talent into the same room and showcasing that actually here are some really cool companies, and you don't have to go through a 3 months, 10 rounds interview process to get a Google internship. You could email the CEO of this cool company tomorrow and potentially get a work experience. And I have seen that from the events that we have done back in February, where people have now taken up internships with Iterate, which is the CTO of Monzo, the ex-CTO of Monzo's new company. And I just want to encourage both the students and the talent to think more broadly, as well as giving people a stage to amplify and be aware.
Yeah, that's a really interesting call to action, I think, as well. Within AI, because it is moving so quickly and because it is so dynamic, actually interns and young people almost have an even bigger advantage and more to offer to those companies that they're trying to get in front of. Husayn, you've hired and built incredible companies in your time. What would be your sort of message to the government in terms of what they need to be thinking of now to make sure that other businesses in the AI sector are able to get the talent they need?
Yeah, so I think talent is relative, and it is hard, and it will always be hard. Because in any vertical that you want to build a category-leading company, if you're effective at hiring and attracting the top 2%, then by definition, you're more likely to win than those who aren't. And it's because it's relative, there's always going to be scarcity there. But we are very, very fortunate. So there's probably like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Your question around, any sort of message for the government. The good is that we actually have a very, very strong base of extremely talented people here in the UK, as it is. That we're a cluster of incredible universities, many, many scale-ups, many places where top talent comes, and that is good. The bad is that the world is becoming competitive, and some of the narrative around some of the political parties in a growing sense is anti-migrant. And you're talented sort of engineer or designer or whatever they're doing, whether they be in Malta or Malaysia, they just don't like the rhetoric. They're like, I can go anywhere in the world and work. Why would I pick a country that, they're not going to make a distinction saying, oh, the frustration is around low-skilled migrants and they love high-skilled migrants. They don't look at that when they see the titles. So that is bad, and it's very, very damaging. We, in my last company, we had 7 offices across the world, and we saw the number of applications to our London office for the same jobs be relatively lower than our Portugal office, in part because of Brexit and in part because of narrative. So this anti-migrant narrative has a negative consequence for hiring and beyond. And then the ugly part is what we're doing in terms of the education for under 18s. Because when you talk of talent, there's 2 concepts, right? Let's attract talent, and that means hiring, and often it means that's hiring from abroad. But it's also let's develop talent. Develop talent means those who are going through the schooling system now, that once come into the world of work, they are prepared. And that is ugly. We are not investing in our schools anywhere near what we ought to be doing. We've got almost 500,000 children that are living in poverty, often struggling to be fed and nourished properly. So how we're talking about becoming a global competitive leader in a specific field like AI, when we actually don't have our own school kids being nourished to be able to concentrate and be the future workforce where we need, especially now because AI can close that gap and help them achieve their full potential. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I would say that AI does offer this chance to close this gap quickly, and you don't need to have as many resources in terms of human teachers, and we should always have more, but you're now able to have the more limited resources that you have, matched with effective strategies to be able to develop the future talent base, which I worry we are really, really behind on. One final quick point in that startups are often looked at as ways to, they should be tasked at training the workforce. That is often not realistic. Startups are at the sharp end of innovation. We kind of need somewhat already skilled people to then come and get ramped quickly and deployed. Like over a 10-year period, we can take those who are somewhat skilled and make them super skilled, but unless we have that baseline, we're gonna struggle. So every time we lose a scale up to the US or an acquisition elsewhere, we're actually falling behind. And that's why this kind of strategy, to your point around the government, should be not a 1 to 5 year one, but a 10 to 50 year one. And we should go back to education, because we're seeing the costs and consequences now, and that's just going to continue.
Well, here, I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience agree with that as well. So building on what you're saying there about the importance of talent in the UK, developing the talent in the UK, it's been, as I've built businesses over the last couple of years, I've had to hire a lot of developers from overseas because it's often cheaper. They're the cheapest developer you can find. And when you're growing a business where you have to keep the costs down, that's just the reality of it. At the same time, as you were saying, across the UK, I'm very conscious that there are regions of the UK where there is a lot of displaced workers. And I really believe we as a country and as a society should be able to fix those 2 things by being able to take some of those jobs that are going overseas to developers and then skill up people in the UK to be able to take those jobs as well, and then level up some of society at the same time. I think you're also right in terms of what you're saying about the basic AI literacy. That is a major challenge that we have at the moment, and that's what will encourage the consumers to use the products and the services and the tools that we're developing at the moment. So just to move on and to sort of start to wrap things up a little bit, in terms of the investment landscape that we have at the moment, when you look at what's happening in the investment landscape, and you both have slightly different perspectives, I imagine, but do you see that it's set up for the AI industry to succeed? I'll come to you, Zoe, first of all, and see what you think.
I was going to say, maybe hear the founder's view first.
Okay, well, maybe we hear the founder's view first, and then we hear the VC's view first on that. But is the investment landscape set up for the AI industry right now?
I'd say, well, yes. So often when you're told, why does the UK not have more startups? The reasons you're given is like, our tax system has a problem, our regulation has a problem. Well, anyone who says that hasn't built any company in the Bay Area, because the taxes are much higher, the regulation is much more strict. In my mind, it's actually got very little or next to nothing to do with that. It's all about the supply of talent needed to be founders, and as important, the operators around those founders. And that goes back to your last question around a proper education system that is fostering the next wave of talent to come through, who then are able to build companies or certainly join as senior operators to serve them. So the problem when you don't have a proper supply of talented, when I say talented, it's in the sense of founder-minded workforce who want to start companies. If you don't address that problem, nothing else matters. What happens is, if you have excess capital, let's say you got like 10 times more money available, and I'd say we already have excess capital, it's not the case that VCs are coming to events and saying, guys, our funds have run out of money. They're coming to events saying, we don't have enough good startups to invest in. And without addressing the pool of talented people to be able to start companies, when you are excessively generous with bloating and having too much capital in, what you're going to get is more startups. But who cares, because they're going to just run out of money 5 years later. We don't care about having 5 times as many startups. What we care about is having 5 times as many exits. Startups that get funded, scale, become profitable, and then sell. So when we don't get this balance right between not addressing the education issue and the supply of founders and operators, and we just feed it more capital, we're going to get bubble after bubble, where many more startups that should be getting funded do get enough funding. At some point, they don't have product market fit, or they're not sustainable, they've raised too much, or the cost base is too much, they run out of money, and then we sort of end a crash. And when you end up with a bubble bursting, even great companies that otherwise should be getting funded, they can also be dragged down when sort of bubbles burst. So it goes back to your previous question in my mind. We don't have a capital problem, we have a human capital problem because of a lack of education.
Can I just ask you to quickly give us a picture of what you think the characteristics are of a successful founder? You talked about them going through these processes and saying it's a human problem. What are those characteristics?
There is this could be a half an hour answer, but a very quick one. Often this ability to have like a helicopter perspective at high up, and then be very specific on the ground to understand what's happening. A ability to think outside the box and have like a creative nature to what they do. An analytical capability to understand the problem, be able to break it down, and have some sort of like a planned approach to solving it. Beyond that, there needs to be like a hunger in there, and that they're like really, they have a chip on their shoulder and they want to like solve something. At the same time, they need to be, to some extent, humble, so that people around them don't think this is the biggest idiot in the world, and I want this company to succeed, and I want to work with them. And this ability that comes from the hunger, in that this pursuit of like learning. And even on your weekend or evenings, you're so passionate about a problem that you want to solve, your mind, even in your leisure time, you're listening to a podcast related to the problem that you're solving.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. And Zoe as well, I mean, you see many founders, you see many companies. So do you think the investment landscape at the moment is set up to support the AI industry?
So I'll first echo on Husayn's point of, I 100% believe that there should be more founders and there should be more supports for people to want to become founders. And to my earlier point of representation matters, that even if someone has those characteristics, if they just grew up in an environment where there's none of that around, it makes it very hard for someone to want to take the lead. Now, I think going to the funding landscape, I hear this kind of stereotype still kind of today in London of, oh, it'll be so much easier to raise money in the Bay Area versus in the UK. There's so much more money there than here. I disagree, kind of as a VC who has to fight for deals in a very competitive industry. There's always multiple term sheets. One is higher than the other. There's a lot of capital kind of in the market that's trying to be deployed. So from that perspective, I would say we're well set up. There's enough money in this sector that wants to flow in. And one of the stats that we found is that 30% of all UK venture funding in H1 have gone into AI-related businesses. And this is the highest it's ever been. Now, to zoom into what that is in terms of what has been funded, I do think we're now starting to see a shift from quote unquote like AI businesses that has an element of it to more fundamental challenges. So we're seeing more how AI investments could manifest themselves. And I think from that perspective, we're still at the early stages and we could see more.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask you what sectors you saw are having the most investment, the most growth. I think you've answered that in terms of talking about those infrastructure level projects. So is it that they are looking to build that capability for the UK? I'm thinking chips in particular, some of the other companies that you're looking at. Or are they still looking at that global market? One of the themes that came up earlier on was that, you've got the US and China, and then you've got everyone else. And actually, there is an opportunity for us as the UK to work with some partners. Or is that also what you're saying from an investment perspective?
So I would say these investments so far that we've seen as a software investor and a not necessarily deep tech investor are trying to address a global problem and is more around innovation in the scientific sense. So an example would be optical chips. It's much more energy efficient, it has more compute power per chip, and this is really a scientific problem that people are still trying to address, and this should benefit the global audience versus UK itself. I think I'm not as well positioned to answer some of the questions here as we focus less so on the infrastructure side.
No, fair enough. And I think one of the other things that we've seen is that professional services, the UK's always been very good at professional services, particularly in fintech, particularly those areas. So is that an area that you're also seeing reflected in what's being invested in now, that professional services layer, rather than maybe some of the more fundamental infrastructure?
For sure. I think to our earlier point of what has been funded, I think on the application layer, how AI is being delivered and what is that last mile is where a lot of the investment has been going towards. Now, this could manifest itself as a new AI software business, or it could be a traditional software business adding on more AI capabilities. Like you mentioned, Notion has added AI, not that it's a UK company, but that made them more AI forward, and I would consider that to be an investment into the direction of AI and benefiting businesses. And more so, we're also seeing the AI-enabled services direction getting more funding, because with technology, these services firms can become more and more scalable, and it can address problems and think about AI as more of a human resource or another form of resource versus just a software layer.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know you came along to our skills roundtable in Parliament a couple of months ago. I'd love to get you more involved in that campaign as well, because there's so much more we need to do together with the government and the Department for Education in terms of delivering on their Tech First initiative. And Zoe, same question to you. What's the one thing you'd ask the ministers or Secretary of State for you to sit down with them now?
I would love to know what is the one thing they use AI for in their life. So perhaps that is the most common ChatGPT questions that they would ask. I would just love to know, is there something actually happening in their own lives that makes them, resonate with this AI wave more? Because I'm unclear, right? For the most part, a lot of people talk about it, but they don't actually use it in their day-to-day life. Now, kind of in terms of the direction of that, pushing that is to say, okay, if you have tried this, or you have seen the impact of this, now think how many more different applications there could be, and then encouraging the flourishing of setting up business, making that process so much easier. It's so easy to set up a website and start a business today. Making that easy, encouraging people to do that rather than a Delaware corp would be incredible.
Great. Well, no, I think that's a really interesting point there. And when we first met with Ferial Clark a year ago, she told us that the thing that the government needs most is stories of where AI is actually delivering, stories that the MPs and the peers can then share with their constituents to help people understand what it means. And that's what we've been trying to do over the last year. And in fact, credit to Minister Clark as well. I think it was earlier on today or yesterday, she was talking about the, those little red books, those of you who have kids, well, no, there's red books you have to carry around and they're all paper and you have to get all the bits of paper stuck in them. And she was saying now there's a government app that is replacing all of that. But the way she framed it as a story, as a mother, on LinkedIn, I thought was really powerful because again, it's the government telling stories that everyone can relate to, and it helps demystify that technology. So yeah, I think very much so. And again, back to that point around human. Okay, well, thank you both very much. It's been very, very insightful to get both of your input there. But stay there for a second because I'd like to just give the audience a few moments to ask us some questions. So can I grab that microphone? And I'll actually wonder whether, is Max around or, actually Zach, could I get you to?
We've got Rupert's helping.
Oh yeah, Rupert. Oh, thanks Rupert. Thank you. Hi.
Thank you so much.
I think I need to switch.
Thank you so much. It was very insightful. So I have maybe two-part question, and to you, Zoe. The hackathon that you mentioned, are those for non-technical people? Is that a requirement that they have to be technical? And how many women do you see in that? I asked this question as a regional lead for an organization called Women Defining AI. And we are trying to move women from being passive users of AI to builders of AI. So it's very key.
So we run a series of events, and I would say they try to address different audiences. I don't necessarily I don't necessarily evaluate the participants based on were they a CS major. It's more, have they tinkered around, right? Like there are so many no-code tools out there. You could build solutions without writing a single line of code, or vibe code is the word. So it's more around like, do you have that drive to want to build something? And that's our criteria. Now, our events are somewhat self-selective in terms of who wants to be there. So as an example, we're doing a weekend hackathon on the first weekend of August. It's going to be out in Stratford, and it's going to be full day for 2 days. And that kind of calls for people who has the caliber to want to build something longer term and launch that. And in the meantime, we're actually going to host a evening mini hack on the Tuesday. And this is kind of in collaboration with some no-code tools out there and web scraping tools. So that's kind of targeting people who wants to start tinkering and is a lower barrier for someone to get started. So I would say like we cater to all different audiences that wants to do something and are curious. Now on your topic around women participation, I think we're starting to see more and more, which I'm very encouraged by. And so as an example, we hosted the 11 Labs and London Founders House hackathon in our office maybe a month ago, and there was about 150 people. Our office was very full as a result of that. And in the demo, around half of the teams had women participants in them. So in the 10 winning demos, about half the team, and that's definitely a major step up compared to last year. Again, to my earlier point, representation matters, and I think the more you see, the more you want to do.
That's amazing, because we had, the Bold Hackathon had 120,000 participants, and Women Defining AI had about 70 of us in about 12 teams.
I'd love to pick up as well within the Empowering Women Leaders working group that we're building, that you're helping with, to actually see whether we could do maybe a hackathon specifically on that point. So let's pick on that. Thank you. And anyone else? Question? Yes, these two gents over here. Jonathan first.
Hi, so my name's Jonathan, I'm an AI solutions consultant. Something that I thought was quite interesting from the both of you, you've got one of you saying education is really important, and you, Zoe, being in the front line in the VC world. I'm trying to distinguish, what are you seeing? Are you seeing what Husayn is actually talking about? Companies coming to you saying, you've got some sort of edu-tech for AI? Or is that being completely overlooked and they're looking more into the typical generative agentic space? I'm just trying to draw a line between the two of you, and that it may be that it's completely different, but I'm just interested to know what you're seeing in the VC market and what people are coming to you with.
So I would say there's definitely innovation in this space that we are seeing. Now, I think a lot of the education startups we're seeing are more consumer focused. So it doesn't necessarily fall under the investment scope for our fund. So we haven't been actively pursuing it. But I think broadly, I would categorize knowledge market as broadly educational as well, because it empowers people to learn. And that's definitely something we've seen a big spike on.
Husayn, did you want to come in on that one as well?
So yeah, I think one of the things that's sometimes missed is around education. I think there's going to be a very different and new type of education that's needed. There's an American professor that talks about types of intelligence. There is propositional intelligence, which is good at summarizing things that AI does well. There's procedural intelligence, like how-to guides, where AI does and the human assists and helps. And then there's perspectival intelligence, from my standpoint. This is what I see, or this is reading between the lines, or relationships, where AI can't do, and in my view, will never be able to do. And that means when you want to have a well-rounded education, we should put under 18s kids, especially, more playtime, more library, more creative things, more social interactions, not just being siloed off and like atomized and just on social media and beyond. So those are the types of things that will give us, in the long term, a more well-rounded education, which is necessary and just requires rethinking. Just like we came from like essentially the factory age and the Industrial Revolution, and education improved to some extent or changed to be more appropriate for the knowledge workers. Now we need a similar shift to take us to more of an AI-first approach.
Thank you. And I think the gentleman here.
Thank you. Should want more of this. Really good discussion. This is a bit of a question in regards to how are we going to take people who have no interest in technology, digital skills, all of these other types of things, and bring them into this, I guess, evolving world of AI? Because I think it's fair for all of us, who have an interest in this, like we're all like tech nerds and policy officials and economists and all these other types of things. We want to learn more about this, but also people out there who don't care about any of this in regards to how they can use AI. There's still stuff like how do I, freeze or top row on Excel spreadsheets, and it's more basic sort of things. And so it's going to be a bit of a transition to bring people from that basic sort of world into, well, we're going to have to use AI as part of your job perhaps to remain competitive. How are we going to bring those people along with us if they're going to be a bit hesitant?
If there's one part of it, it is to reshape the narrative, which is wrongly talks about AI is going to replace your job. In reality, I don't think that's going to be the case for the vast majority. You will be outcompeted by someone similar to you that's more proficient in AI. So it's not human versus AI, it's human versus human with AI, essentially. So that needs to, I mean, that does go back to education. The second thing is, it's not, just like the internet, it's important, we use it in our daily lives. Not everyone needs to be proficient or experienced at it. And a large part of the workforce will remain just service-based in the sense of needing a lot of those perspectival type and relationship type of intelligence, where knowledge work may be necessary, but wouldn't necessarily be part and parcel of their daily tasks. The benefit of AI means that we can now generate and produce a lot more with less. That means if we have a more effective redistributive system, that people can just, across every single member of the country, could benefit from the rewards of it if we were to address how the gains are distributed better.
Great. Thank you. So I think we're going to have to wrap things up there, but please do stick around afterwards and enjoy some drinks and nibbles outside in the room behind us. So I'll just give some closing thoughts in a minute, but I also wanted to give the opportunity to Husayn to tell us a little bit more about the London AI Hub, and to thank you and Rupert and the team for hosting us this afternoon for this amazing event. So thank you, London AI Hub. And Husayn, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about London AI Hub? Wonderful. Again, thank you. Just before I get going, can we all give a round of applause to UKAI and Tim for doing such an incredible job. So I'm one of the 3 co-initiators of London AI Hub, along with Morantix and TechNation. And we got together and we realized about a year ago that AI is essentially sector agnostic. Across most industries and most sectors, AI is important, but there's not essentially a centralized place for events like this and this community to come together. There's a strong interest for individuals in AI across these different sectors to meet, but they typically don't. And that's why we felt that there was scope to do this. So we are a community of now 2,000 members. It's free to sign up. You should go to londonaihub.co.uk to sign up, and you'll be kept up to date with all of our events. We typically do one large event like this every 2 weeks and a whole series of smaller events. So on Tuesday morning, we have a roundtable breakfast
with senior leadership from Ofcom to talk about their new AI paper that they just released. And our ambition as like a non-profit is to facilitate as many rich stakeholder engagements as we can. That is with regulators, policymakers, builders, academics, and others. So do sign up and get involved. And yeah, thank you again for coming today.
Well, thank you. And just some closing thoughts from me, because I know you will probably want to go and get some cold drinks outside and cool down on this hot day. Firstly, thank you very much for coming together to hear all of our amazing speakers today. And I really hope it's been as educational for you as it has been for me to hear from such a variety of experts around the challenges. What we're going to do now is take all of this feedback, all of this insight, and build it into a report that really summarises where we are 6 months on. So we'll be sharing that with all of you, with the updated scorecards, with all the input from today's speakers. And it's really important that we as an industry take ownership of this and we really set out what we want the industry to look like. So that's always been key for a UKAI, because AI is our business and we want to shape this industry. I think there are a number of things which we felt were missing from that original AI Opportunities Action Plan, which we've covered off today. We've talked about responsibility, we've talked about the importance of skills in particular, that earlier and broader, and we've really looked at what it is to be an international player for the UK, what the opportunities are for the UK to lead. So that's been incredibly useful for us. Now, our role, I'm sure lots of you are already involved with UKAI, so I'd encourage you to come and find us afterwards. Anyone with I haven't got it on at the moment, a green lanyard, I was going to say, is UKAI, so please do come in and talk to us to find out more, and come along to our future events. So in addition to events like this, which are our public events, where we have them outside of Parliament, we also have events in Parliament, and that's where we bring our members together to really influence government, but also to understand what the government is doing. And we also bring in academia and third sector into those events in Parliament to really be able to influence. But then we're also doing more of the workshops where we're engaging on specific areas. So we did one a couple of weeks ago on cybersecurity, bringing our members in and helping them to really influence what the government is thinking about in that field, and we'll be doing more of that. Yeah, please do come and say hi in the drinks afterwards. And I'd like to thank once again our amazing speakers, many of whom have left, many of whom are still here. So thank you to our amazing speakers today. Thank you all, and thanks. Bye-bye.